With the United Nations establishing the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, there are 17 environmental and societal issues that are to be addressed and accomplished by its members by 2030. One of the global issues to be addressed would be the climate action, or SDG 13. Through the years, research suggests that the Earth's temperature has been constantly rising in small increments. To have the UN bring into focus climate action, it is without a doubt that every rise in temperature matters, as each rise affects everyone in different ways. In 2020, we face a temporary reduction of CO2 emissions due to the pandemic. However, a rise of 6.0% in CO2 emissions occurred due to the global demand for coal, oil, and gas that rebounded with the economy by 2021. With the current national commitment, global emissions are expected to increase by 14% by the end of the decade. This projection would in fact lead to a climate catastrophe if private and public sectors do not address the issue seriously. As of 2022, climate change has wreaked various effects on our environment. However, despite the ever so constant change, countries, both developing and developed, have pinpointed such issues and are starting to look for possible solutions and adapting technologies to help mitigate climate change. With the increase in global CO2 emissions, the proliferation of these greenhouse gases will continue to affect the environment significantly. Having trapped heat, certain parts of the globe experience heat waves. It comes with its own effects, such as wildfires that cause devastation to ecosystems and infrastructures and affect animal and human health. One of the most recent wildfires would be those that occurred in Europe. On July 17, 2022, the southernmost part of Europe had to control wildfires across Greece, France, and Spain. The aftermath of the wildfire caused hundreds of deaths, as scientists stated that the rise in temperature is consistent with climate change. In a European context, countries are fending off heat waves by establishing more green spaces to provide shade that would help alleviate heat absorption by roads and paved areas. Since then, Barcelona has approximately 1.4 million planted trees, which is more than any other city in Europe. Italy, on the other hand, is targeting to plant 3 million trees by 2030 as part of its Forestami initiative. Meanwhile, Austria's capital, Vienna, is creating a car-free or cool street to mitigate heat waves. These cool streets offer outdoor seating as well as cool mist sprays that dispense cool vapors of cloud. Both solutions done by the aforementioned European countries help in mitigating heat waves, despite the solution being considered as simple by some people. However, with cityscaping providing more greenscapes or cool street neighborhoods help a certain area to be a more habitable to people without worrying about the detrimental effects of heat waves to one's health.
Another pressing issue found worldwide that is caused by climate change would be rising sea levels. Assuming that we miss the window to avoid catastrophe by 2100, sea levels will rise by 30 to 60 centimeters. The global average sea levels rose throughout the century and have changed in acceleration in recent years. When averaged from 1880 to 2013, the average rise would be 0.06 inches. Since 1993, however, the average sea level has risen at a rate of 0.12 to 0.14 inches per year, roughly twice as fast as the long-term trend. With the increase in sea levels over the years, the European Environment Agency stated the potential impacts of sea level rise include flooding, coastal erosion, and the submergence of flat regions along continental coastlines and on islands. Countries have found ways to combat floods in order to protect their coasts from the detrimental effects of rising sea levels. For example, Netherlands own Delta Works, southwest of the country, which is an engineering marvel built after the flood of 1953. This functions as a large-scale system with 13 sections, which includes dikes, a storm surge barrier, and dams. In the northeastern part of the Netherlands, they have collaborated with EcoShape to establish salt marshes to help mitigate rising sea levels and subsidence. Both of the solutions done by the Netherlands integrated science and technology in order to impose a better standard of city living on its citizens. The government understands the risks as well as the detrimental effects of flooding, and these solutions are the product of prepared and well planned disaster risk management safety measures that would be a viable project in the long run. Although expensive, it is without a doubt that these solutions bear positive outcomes during times of calamity.
The Philippines is one of the countries most vulnerable to climate-related weather events. In a recent 2022 report titled International Public Opinion on Climate Change, Yale's program on climate change communication revealed that 85% of Filipinos express deep concerns about climate change, while 87% of Filipinos believe that such an environmental issue is a serious threat in the next 20 years. Furthermore, 82% of Filipinos personally perceive the problem of climate change as very important to extremely important, and 7 out of 10 Filipinos live every day with the knowledge that the consequences will be disastrous.
A warmer world will undoubtedly have an impact on the systems and sectors. However, the magnitude of the impact will be determined by factors such as sensitivity, exposure, and adaptive capacity to climate risk. In most cases, the likely consequences will be negative. Water stress, both in quantity and quality, is expected in areas and regions where rainfall is expected to decrease, which will mostly likely cascade into more negative impacts, particularly on forestry, agriculture and livelihood, health, and human settlement. Changes in rainfall regimes and patterns, which result in increased and decreased water use and temperature increases, may cause a shift in the forest ecosystem, especially in areas where rains are scarce and may no longer provide favorable conditions for certain highly sensitive species. Flooding events may occur in areas where rainfall is expected to be intense during wet periods, posing a risk to human settlements and infrastructure in the form of landslides and mudslides, particularly in geological landslides. Heavy daily rainfall will continue to increase and extreme rainfall will increase only in Luzon and Visayas, but the number of dry days will increase across the country in 2020 and 2050.
This viewpoint is strengthened by the fact that extreme weather events are the most visible manifestation of climate change, and Filipinos bore the brunt of them, as 8 of the top 10 costliest Philippine typhoons occurred in the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2021. The increase in greenhouse gas concentrations caused by human activities, such as the use of fossil fuels for energy, the emission of harmful gases from transportation used by cars, motorcycles, and airplanes, deforestation, and improper waste disposal is what causing the warming of the climate system. The rapid expansion of climate change poses major threats to man and the environment in the present and future. And these impacts are now unavoidable given the amount of greenhouse gases currently saturating our atmosphere as a result of previous decades of human activity, combined with the increased contribution of the next decade of urbanization.
This leads us to the plans of action taken by the Philippine government and the Filipino people in response to the presence of climate change and the manifested effects in our country, starting with the commitment of Pag-asa and the Department of Science and Technology in taking steps to cope with changing climate conditions through mitigation and adaptation, which means reducing negative impacts and capitalizing on potential benefits. This is further empowered by the Climate Change Act of 2009, wherein it recognized the vulnerability of the Philippines to climate change and the need for appropriate adaptation.
It establishes a comprehensive framework for systematically incorporating the concept of climate change, in conjunction with disaster risk reduction at various stages of policy formation, development plans, poverty reduction techniques, and other development tools and strategies. The Act outlines the key principles of climate change policy, including shared but differentiated responsibilities, the precautionary principle, UNFCCC objectives, and the YOGO framework for action on disaster risk reduction. It takes a gender-sensitive, pro-child, and pro-poor stance.
In line with the establishment of the said Act, the National Climate Change Action Plan or NCAP came into fruition as the Philippine government's executive branch adopted this in November of 2011. This assesses the country's current climate change risk situation and outlines the NCAP's adaptation and mitigation agenda for 2011 to 2028 in response to the current situation and projected impact.
It also prioritizes food security, water sufficiency, ecosystem and environmental stability, human security, climate-smart services, sustainable energy, and capacity development as the direction for 2011 and 2028. The multi-sectoral processes carried out ensured that the concerns of various sectors were heard and taken into account to ensure maximum mitigation opportunities for long-term development.
Another is the formation of the Climate Change Commission or CCC. They are in charge of developing key policy instruments that will lay the groundwork for a climate-resilient Philippines. Many of these policy instruments necessitate collaboration with relevant government agencies, resulting in the release of joint memorandum on budget tagging, natural ecosystem protection, capacity building of LGUs and other agencies, and even support for climate science research.
The CCC proceeds to monitor the progress of climate change action at the national level, producing documents such as the Monitoring and Evaluation Report and the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory. Furthermore, with the enhancement of the National Integrated Climate Change Database and Information Exchange System, the CCC has improved its monitoring capabilities on the tracking progress on climate change action with the NICTs. From sources and actors coming from both public and private sectors and other stakeholders, allowing for decision makers to access, distribute, and exchange these data for use in policy making, development planning, and investment decision making.